I thank the speaker, and I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
So ordered.
The important question being asked today with regards to foreign policy is, should United States impose a no-fly zone over Libya? There are leaders in both sides of Congress and leaders on both parties who are now advising this, as well as individuals in the administration. It is my opinion that we should not. It would be foolish, it would have a downside, and we should think very, very carefully before we go expanding the wars that we're already involved in. We're in two major wars with Iraq and Afghanistan, and that involves Pakistan and Yemen already. So to go into Libya now and impose a no-fly zone, we have to remember a no-fly zone is an act of war. Now, what moral right do we have to participate in war activity against Libya? Libya hasn't done anything to the United States. They're not a threat to our national security. There's been no aggression. There's no constitutional authority for a president to willy-nilly go and start placing no-fly zones over countries around the world. And you know, we tried this in the 1990s and did it for 8 or 9 years. We had a no-fly zone along with sanctions and blockades around Iraq. And finally it ended up a war, and the wars were based on lies. And then when that happened, they said, yes, but it was well worth it because we got rid of a bad guy. But we also lost close to 4,500 American military people, 30-some thousand severe injuries, hundreds of thousands applying now for disability, because we went to war when we shouldn't have gone to war. And to expand this war now makes no sense whatsoever. It's against international law. It challenges the War Powers Resolution. And for that reason, we should stop and think. Congress should act. I'm proposing to, preparing to introduce a resolution next week, and it's a sense of Congress, that the executive branch can't do this without approval from the Congress. Why should we do this? Do you think it'll cost some money? Yes, it's going to cost a ton of money. And it's going to have, innocent people will be killed. You can't just all of a sudden turn a switch and say, don't fly over Libya. You have to bomb a lot of anti-aircraft sites and a lot of military establishment. So the war is on. And from my viewpoint, this is the kind of thing that's been going on too long. It contributes significantly to our bankruptcy. And we are now spending approximately $1 trillion a year maintaining our empire around the world. We are in the process of remaking all the borders and leadership in Middle East, Central Asia, and now North Africa. We get involved. We had invested $70 billion trying to prop up a dictator in Egypt, and look how that ended up. Now we're hustling around to find out who the next dictator is. So if we get involved, I'm not sure they even know who to bomb and why, which one, and who's going to come out on top. That is an internal matter. It's a civil war that's going on, and we can cheer for one side or the other, but that is not a justification to place the burden on the American.
The Fukushima nuclear power plant, as has been explained so far, after the earthquake and the tsunami, the nuclear reactors have shut down, and ordinarily, the emergency diesel engines that should have been used to cool down the reactors have all gone out of function. Every possible method has been used to cool down the reactor. However, for reactor number 1 and reactor number 3, hydrogen came out and causing a hydrogen explosion, and also for reactor 4 we have seen fire. And radiation has spread from these reactors, and the reading of the level seems very high. And there is still a very high risk of further radioactive material from coming out. from the Fukushima No.1 nuclear power plant, a 20-kilometer radius has become an area for evacuation. Most of the people have evacuated from this area. We need now for everybody to move out of the 20-kilometer radius from the No.1 plant. And in areas from 20 to 30 kilometers from the power plant, depending on what happens at the power plant, we would like to ask you to remain indoors, at home or in your offices. We would like to ask you to remain indoors.
The situation in Japan is dire. It's grave, and I think it doesn't suit anyone's purposes to downplay it. They're engaged in desperate measures to try to prevent the cores of up to 3 reactors from completely melting down, and large radiological releases that could have a major health environmental impact on Japan. If there's a large-scale radiological release, then within tens of kilometers, people would be at risk for acute radiation exposure. That is, radiation exposures that are so high that you would see immediate and potentially life-threatening effects. Beyond perhaps 30 or 40 kilometers downwind, that threat would be lessened, but there would still be a significant risk of radiation exposure that could increase the chance of getting cancer. Reactors are built to certain seismic standards. It's very expensive especially to retrofit a reactor for increased seismic standards, and it seems pretty clear that this was an event that should have been anticipated, and the outcome indicates that the impact was not fully understood on these reactors, and therefore I would say it was a failure of Japan to treat its nuclear program with the level of care that it deserved. I think this should at least question the complacency that I've seen among the nuclear industry and lawmakers and the nuclear regulators here in the United States. I think given Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island receded in the distance, people forgot about them and they started to assume that nuclear power was safe and it couldn't happen again. I think this will force a fresh look at the risks of nuclear power and whether or not the standards that were put in place for new reactors are adequate. I think they're not. I think there will need to be additional safeguards if we're going to have safe nuclear power in this country.
According to the weather reports today, it will be raining and snowing in Tokyo tomorrow. This is bad news for Japan. When it rains, the floating radioactive materials in the air settle down and concentrate in a particular place. This is bad for locals in Japan, but will have little impact for other parts of Asia.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Tuesday, March 15th, 2011. I'm Darko. Welcome to part 3 of this news bulletin, everyone. I just brought some videos here on the Japanese earthquake tsunami, but more importantly, the nuclear meltdown that is occurring in those reactors. And then you heard kind of a grim report, the second from last video there, on what the situation actually is. I'm just trying to do my best here to present all sorts of information from different sources so that you can get a better idea. I'm not trying to tell you whether it's a risk here in the United States or not, because I honestly don't know, and all I can do is, like I said, provide all these different sources, and then you make your own decision whether you want to run out and freak out and get some potassium iodide tablets or not. But that's up to you. It says here green, and www.ggnonline.com. I got to plug my website, www.ggnonline.com. So there you go. Green Investment Bank must not be compromised, says MPs, and we'll finish up on some financial information here, and then we'll follow up with the Japanese earthquake. The UK could lose out on hundreds of billions of pounds on green investment and fail to meet climate change targets if the government compromises on its Green Investment Bank, MPs have warned. And then carbon policy to be explained over time. Australians need time to discuss the implementation of a carbon price, Prime Minister Gilliard said. And she said that the federal government proposed a carbon tax without many details, so the policy could evolve and be properly explained. So that's why it hasn't been passed yet, Australians, is that you don't understand it enough. See, once you understand what it is, then you'll agree with it. Says here, carbon tax protesters gather in Victoria of Australia. Says a carbon tax battle is extended from political field on the streets of Melbourne, on Australia on Saturday. 400 protesters gathered with Liberal Victorian Senators Mitch Field and Scott Ryan to protest against the price on carbon outside Prime Minister Julia Gillard's electoral office in Victoria. And next we have House panel votes to bar EPA tailpipe emission regulations. And it says here, a House panel approved a bill to block the EPA from regulating tailpipe emissions, but the measure's future is uncertain. And then next up we have Americans for Sale. It says it might be if Washington doesn't solve the deficit problem. And of course we all saw this coming, right? Those who had our eyes open, just like in Arizona, they're already selling off a Capitol building and that. So only 20%. And of course you have the privatization and the privatization step, right, where basically all of these public infrastructure or municipalities, which were, you know, in the last couple of years, 5-10 years, have been have your tax dollars thrown into to upgrade and upkeep them, and now they're going to hand them over to private corporations. They're going to jack up your prices afterwards. Only 20% of U.S. approves of Congress. Then we have Moody's Insurers face heavy losses. 10 reasons why you won't be able to retire at 65. Of course, not saving enough because why? You don't have anything to save. You're spending it all on food and basic necessities because of what? Inflation. Don't know how much to save. Well, I don't know what the heck that's all about. Healthcare and insurance costs, of course. Long-term care expensive. Early withdrawals. Too much debt. Few guarantees. Higher retirement age. Delayed expectations and unplanned retirement. Then worker confidence on retirement at 20-year low. I wonder why. It says here, UN atom chief sees possible Japan plant core damage. Then fire breaks out at Japan Fukushima Daiichi No.4 reactor building. Japan's nightmare gets even worse. All 3 damaged nuclear reactors now in meltdown at tsunami-hit power station. Japan, it says here, panicked residents start to flee Tokyo as radiation levels rise after third blast has stricken nuclear power plant. It says here, radioactive clouds spreading in Japan. And Japan's nuclear crisis, radiation plume threatens Tokyo. Japan's nuclear threat, no Chernobyl. And it says Japanese authorities scrambled to avert a meltdown. And it says here, Cabinet Secretary Yukio Adano is offering assurances. Everything's going to be all right. And here you can go on here and check out the real-time United States radiation map. This was just updated a few minutes ago, but the link will be posted so you can go there and check it out. Next up we have Japan earthquake, radiation levels fall at the Fukushima, then no nuclear radiation detected in East China Sea after Japan quake. And then we have here, Japan faces a nuclear nightmare. So a lot of scaremongering going on here. Hopefully they'll be okay. It says nuclear engineer fuel rod fire at Fukushima reactor would be like Chernobyl on steroids. And when I say that, I hope they'll be okay. I mean that. I mean hopefully they'll get the truth so that they have enough time to get the hell out of there and be safe, and they're not just being told a bunch of propaganda or lies or just anything, and to keep them there to basically calm the markets so that they don't lose markets in Wall Street, right? And while people are getting sick. So, and it says it's going to be like a Chernobyl disaster, and it says this, no, it's not worse than Chernobyl, just stop it. So you can go in there and check it, and he's saying that it's not as bad as what it seems. And it says here, fire at Japan nuclear reactor heightens radiation threat. A nuclear meltdown is an informal term for severe nuclear reactor accidents that result in core damage from overheating. So go in there and check that out. And here's a better way of a logical assessment of Japan's nuke disaster, and it tells you radiation levels. So go in there and check it out. Links will be posted for these dangers for human health from radiation poisoning, questions and answers. So my goal here is to pretty much cover the headlines and post the links so that you guys can take the time and go in there. I spent a lot of time getting all this. So please join me in part 4. This is GGN and I'm Darko.